It's a Sunday morning of sunshine across much of the eastern part of the United States, but we've got some issues to deal with today, severe weather-wise across parts of the Ohio and Tennessee Valley, and the flash flood risks that extend northwestward from there into the upper Mississippi Valley. And those severe weather and flash flood risks are going to be moving into the eastern part of the United States on Monday, and they look like they loom large. It seems to be an impressive system that we're going to be dealing with in the east tomorrow. So we're going to be talking about that in incredibly great detail today, as we do every day about weather, right here on the Joe and Joe Weather Show, brought to you by Omni True Value Hardware at 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon, New York, in southwest Suffolk County on Long Island. Mulch, topsoil, sand, and of course, for hurricane preps, you might need a generator, batteries, or flashlights, or a whole host of other things. You can get them all at Omni, 631-756-1125. I can't find better prices anywhere. And the website is
OmniTrueValue.com.
Tempest by WeatherFlow, Joe. Get the revolutionary Tempest weather system and join the fastest growing observing weather network on the planet. It's easy to install, really is easy to install. The link is pinned to the top of the chat board, and it's on the descriptor to this live video. And of course, if you make any purchases there, being this or any of the other weather gadgets and gizmos they have, use the coupon code I want a weather station. And you do want a weather station, but use I want a weather station, and Joe Rayo will tell you what you get.
You'll get, Johnny, 10% off anything that you get from Tempest.
Lovely. Okay, so we've got a nice day today. However, I'm going to be paying close attention to what happens today in areas to the west, where the weather system that is there now moving into the Ohio Valley is going to be impacting the eastern part of the United States tomorrow. I'm thinking, Joe, that tomorrow's going to be a very interesting day from the standpoint of severe weather. Not only do you have a large area of geographic risk that SPC has outlined, but we also have a situation with a fairly sharp upper trough that's going to be not only moving through but strengthening as it does so. And I think that opens the door to not only severe thunderstorms, but I think the potential that we could see some tornado action in the east.
Well, first of all, I'm happy to say that my thoughts about today in the tri-state area have turned out to be not as bad as I was thinking. I was saying that, if you remember when we were last together, that today would be the cloudier of the two weekend days. And as it turns out,
yesterday was.
Today's going to be a beautiful day. It's going to be bright and sunny. We actually did cloud over a bit during the mid and late afternoon yesterday and into last night. But those clouds were only temporal. They moved on out during the overnight. And as I said, for today, it looks like, Joe, that we're going to have, save for maybe a few patchy high clouds, just beautiful weather from start to finish across much of the, again, tri-state metropolitan area. As far as the situation for tomorrow, you're absolutely right. We rarely ever see that the Storm Prediction Center opens up such a wide area of marginal and severe, and now an enhanced threat of severe, which covers portions of Maryland and Virginia and North Carolina, with a potential 5% tornado risk. And it looks like for the New York metropolitan area, this may actually come in two shots. The first shot coming in the morning tomorrow, and then later tomorrow, or more likely maybe tomorrow evening, we may see another round of showery and thundery weather. Although ironically, for all of the regions that are underneath a slight risk or an enhanced risk of severe, up where I am, we're barely into the marginal risk. It looks like a lot of the thoughts are that the most concentrated area of nasty weather is going to be to the west and south of the tri-state metropolitan area, which in a way is good. We don't need, we've had our fair share of severe weather and all kinds of craziness that has happened up here this summer. And I don't wish this on anybody, but it looks like right now that the worst of this, again, is going to be a few hundred miles south and west of here. And this is the area, the same area, by the way, that was being highlighted as far back as, Wednesday or Thursday, the day 5 outlook for possible severe. And now here it is practically upon us.
Well, they said yesterday when it was in the day 3 part of their forecast, which, by the way, only gets updated, doesn't get updated at all. When they do the day 3 forecast, it usually is done at 2 o'clock in the morning, and they don't update that till it gets into the day 2 time frame. So they didn't change it yesterday. However, in the discussion, they said that the forecaster said that he opted not to go enhanced at this time, being when he made the forecast yesterday, and just basically said, I'm going to paraphrase. He says, I could have gone enhanced, but I decided to just go slight and let things come into focus, and then they can always go to enhanced tomorrow. So that was the indicator that they were thinking along the lines that we've been thinking. As you know, Joe, they watch us, almost continuously.
Well,
they even binge watch back. Right now they're watching 2019 Joe and Joe weather shows. But that was the tip off that they were going to go to an enhanced area. Now, here's what. By the way, I just want to just say also, when Joe says the tri-state area, he's referring to New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut tri-state areas, since there are a number of tri-state areas. And even quad state areas, but what he's referring to that specifically, just so you know. But this is going to be impacting. This cold front's going to be impacting everybody from Georgia all the way up. Now, the key for you, in my view, this is one of those situations where we've got the warm front cold front combination. So sometimes when you get the warm frontal stuff ahead of it, and it takes a little longer to get out of the way, you don't get quite as warm sectored as you otherwise would be. And I think that's the question for you tomorrow morning. There are going to be some showers and thunderstorms tonight ahead of the warm front that are going to move through. If you look at the way things are set up for tomorrow morning, the back edge of those showers will be right at about, if you draw a line from New York City, north-south, north going through upstate New York and then south off the New Jersey coast, that's where the back edge of the showers and thunderstorms will be, and that's where the warm front will be. So the question is, does that rob some of the daytime heating in the eastern flank of where the severe weather risk is going to be? If it gets out sooner and you break out into sunshine with dew points going up into the 70s in a lot of locations, that'll be your tip. That's going to be the tip off for those areas that are kind of on the border of whether you're going to wind up into a more difficult situation when it comes to severe weather later in the day. The daytime heating is going to be key for those areas. So if you're if you're east of the Hudson River, if you're New York City, maybe easternmost New Jersey, Long Island, southern New England, that's what you have to look for. Does the warm front get through faster and goes further north than advertised, which would put you more solidly into the warm sector and set you up for the severe weather risk later in the day? The other thing I would also mention too is the fact that with the dew points going up into the low and mid 70s, whether the thunderstorms are severe, quote unquote, in other words, with the potential for 50-mile-an-hour wind gusts for those areas, what might also happen is you might not get a severe thunderstorm, but with all that moisture and that southeast input coming in, some of these thunderstorms are going to probably wind up being big rain producers, and I think we need to be on the alert for some localized flash flooding tomorrow.
It could very well be. Now, this warm front may take the better part of the day tomorrow just to get through the New York City metropolitan area. In fact, the cold front, there's a storm that's going to be passing to our north across upstate New York during late Monday and Tuesday, and will be intensifying. Will be getting stronger. And that's eventually going to push the cold front on early Tuesday through here with its own share of possible nasty weather. And so it's going to be interesting to watch to see how things are going to develop virtually on an hour by hour basis, depending upon where the warm front is. And also, as you mentioned, Joe, the dew points. The dew points have been held at bay the last couple of days, have been mostly in the upper 50s. But listen to this. Tomorrow, again, they're going to go at least 10 points higher, 10 degrees higher into the upper 60s. And yes, with enough sunshine stirring the atmosphere up and making things unstable, and the possibility of dew points rising to above 70, the air really tomorrow is going to be all juiced up for the potential for severe weather. And that's why, especially so south and west of New York City, that's why they probably said, all right, let's go with enhanced for this particular run. And that's what they're suggesting. And we'll see how all of this pans out.
Right. You brought up something else that I wanted to bring up too. This is one of those situations where the shortwave trough that is driving all of this is strengthening as it moves eastward, and not just holding its own or weakening. And oftentimes, the strongest thunderstorm activity that we've seen comes in situations when shortwave troughs that are driving which are the driving force here, or is the driving force here, is strengthening as we go through the day tomorrow and in tomorrow night. So that I think is another thing to consider. Maybe you don't get warm sectored as efficiently as you might otherwise would, but the stronger shortwave in the upper atmosphere will create, juice the atmosphere up, create wind shear conditions and all the rest of it, that it might compensate somewhat for the fact that you may not be as deep in the warm sector as you might otherwise would be. So I think that's something, as you said, this is going to be, from that for tomorrow, it's going to be a matter of sitting down and watching the radars and how they all evolve during the afternoon and evening. And some of the models have a very bullish look with regards to the severe weather outcome for tomorrow. So anyway, why don't we just go to Storm Prediction Center right off the bat and just take a look at what they're doing here. By the way, welcome to everybody this Sunday morning. Welcome those of you on the chat board, those of you who are watching in the background. Of course, you could certainly welcome you to participate in the conversation and share your comments and questions by subscribing to my YouTube channel and putting in your Gmail account, and you're all set to go. And you can chat, and if you don't want to, that's cool too. You can also turn your notifications on, because the Joe and Joe Weather Show is on Monday through Thursday at 7:35 p.m. We're on Sundays at 11 a.m. Sometimes we do alter the schedule to sort of help us out ourselves when we've got other things to do. And Fridays and Saturdays we're off, but if there are storms around, you can be sure that Joe and I will probably do a show on a Friday or a Saturday night, like if there's a snowstorm or a hurricane or a big severe weather event. So this is for today, and in fact, I've been sitting here because there have been some thunderstorms around me, and I'm hoping that I get one, if only because of the fact that I don't want to go out with my hose and water my yard. But nonetheless, today's risk area is from western PA down the Appalachians into Georgia and North Florida. We've got a slight risk of severe weather covering much of northern and central Georgia, northwestward into Alabama, Mississippi, and then northward from there into Tennessee, Kentucky, Indiana, small portion of southwest Ohio, southern and central Illinois, and into eastern Missouri. Also, we've got a marginal risk from the westernmost part of the Oklahoma Panhandle northwestward through Colorado and into parts of Wyoming. Now, tomorrow, this is where it gets a little dicey. And as Joe pointed out, the marginal risk line is from eastern Long Island northwestward into western Vermont. So a marginal risk, in my mind, I always think in terms of an isolated severe thunderstorm. Slight risk, the slight risk goes across southern New York into the Catskills, most of northern New Jersey except the extreme northeast. So it's just west of New York City to just west of Trenton. The line for slight risk runs down into southern Delaware through Chesapeake Bay to about Richmond in Virginia, somewhere east of Raleigh, Durham, North Carolina. Further south from there, north and west of the coast of South Carolina, and then sort of swings around back through Alabama, up to through Tennessee near Nashville, southeastern Ohio, and into northwestern PA. And you can see the enhanced risk gets into southernmost Pennsylvania, south and west of Harrisburg would be where I would define it as, and south of Altoona down through much of central and western Maryland, much of central and western Virginia, most of West Virginia, down the Southern Appalachians into northeast Georgia, northwest South Carolina, and the western half of North Carolina. And the tornado risk. Usually, you start to get deeper into August, your tornado risk tends to be lower than, say, if you were in July or June or May. But this is fairly elevated for August. Excuse me, we have a 2% tornado risk reaching up into southern New York and western New Jersey, and that goes all the way down into northern Georgia and northeastern Alabama. But they've got a 5% tornado risk in southeast Ohio, much of West Virginia, northern Virginia, central and western Maryland. I think the 5%, Joe, probably Washington, D.C. and Baltimore, if they're not in that 5%, they're barely out of it. So if they're not at 5% risk, they're at 4.75% risk. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
I tend to think there's probably going to be a little bit of massaging in terms of the overall risk zones come tomorrow. Maybe they'll nudge the slight risk a little bit further northeast. I don't know that that's going to change that much. I'm wondering whether they may add a small area of moderate risk somewhere down in the interior mid-Atlantic states.
It crossed my mind that maybe they could go one rating or one ranking upward, and moderate, which is something that that these days you don't see moderate very often. Maybe like once or twice a year, and in this part of the country. And what can I say? Tomorrow might be the day that one pops up, maybe in a part of a slice of West Virginia, maybe Tennessee, or the northwestern North Carolina.
Yeah, I would. I agree. 15% is the wind risk, and you can see it here. And the hail risk I'm sorry, that's the hail risk, 15%. From North Georgia to southern Pennsylvania. The wind risk, a 30% chance that there could be wind gusts of, sorry about that, 50 knots or more. That was the banana and the cottage cheese I had for breakfast, by the way. 30% risk for the strong winds from northeast Georgia up into southern Pennsylvania, and maybe about 100 miles either side of that line. And 15% goes all the way up into southern New York. The 50% pretty much covers the entire slight risk zone. The 30% covers the enhanced risk zone. There's no hatched area. When they put the hatched area, that means that there's a 10% or greater probability of 65 knots or greater within 25 miles of any point. So that covers you for tomorrow. Now,
and that's what I meant by the fact that it's going to be an hour by hour thing, because they're going to be watching the Storm Prediction Center, I'm sure, at local forecast offices, and they're going to see how this develops as the late morning and afternoon wears on. And it may be, tomorrow morning, the new or updated graphic will continue to show enhanced, but maybe based upon what they've been seeing, like by late morning or early afternoon, they may just put a little zone of moderate somewhere within the enhanced zone for the midday or early afternoon update.
Two super chat hits I want to acknowledge. Frank Scalera banging the tip jar this morning. Thank you, Frank, as always. And Leon Probitsky also banging the tip jar this morning. So thank you both for hitting super chat today. The upper trough is going to take another day to get through, which is why the Storm Prediction Center has a marginal risk for severe weather in northeast New Jersey, the Hudson Valley, mainly east of the Hudson, southern and central New England, and down to Long Island. This is for Tuesday. So Tuesday's not going to wind up being a big severe weather risk day behind it, but there's still going to be some leftover moisture around. The dew points come down a little Tuesday, but they don't come down a lot. You got to wait for the upper trough to go by, so that's why they're doing what they're doing. Marginal risk across parts of the southeast and the deep south. Marginal to slight risk in the central plains. And checking out the day 4 to 8 time frame, I just want to acknowledge that on day 5, or is it day 6? No, it's day 4. I'm sorry, on day 4. The middle Mississippi and parts of the Missouri River Valley under a 15% risk. And as I have said, and Joe has said it as well many times, when SPC sees something and they put it in their long range, which they don't always do, that's a pay attention. One of those neon signs that says pay attention, and it starts flashing in red. Because to have enough confidence 4, 5, 6, 7, or 8 days out, because particularly if you see it in a day 7 or day 8, if they're throwing severe weather risk up in a day 7 or day 8 time frame, it must be a pretty dynamic situation for them to do it. So that's a clue. And the other thing is mentioning about the fact that it could be a flash flood situation for tomorrow. This is today's outlook from WPC, the weather prediction folks, which have a slight risk in a small area. Now, the area that you see in Pennsylvania and New Jersey, New York State, and Maryland, those areas, that's going to come from the warm front going by tonight. So sometimes you can get a warm front that has a thunderstorm in it that winds up deciding it's going to pour all the water it can get its hands on over you. So bear that in mind. The slight risk that you see from northwest Tennessee, northwestward into Iowa, that is from the severe thunderstorms that they're going to get today that's going to be coming into the east tomorrow. Tomorrow's forecast, which has not really changed much from yesterday, has a fairly large area of marginal risk up the southern and central Appalachians, and then it becomes a slight risk when you get to northeasternmost Virginia, Maryland, into eastern and central Pennsylvania, the northern half of New Jersey to Long Island, and up pretty much all the way up through western New England and upstate New York. I don't know. I would not be shocked if this area gets played around with a little bit, maybe widens out a bit, and maybe they stick a moderate risk for flash flooding, which would be a 40 to 70% chance of flash flooding if it's a moderate risk, and the slight risk is 15 to 40% chance. So just bear that in mind. And in terms,
and you know what, Joe? And yes. You know what? If there was a moderate risk in that zone, the place that probably clearly they will not only be over your house, but they'll put it on the map, Joe. They'll put an arrow on the map that says Joe Rayo's house, and the arrow. No, I actually didn't. I wasn't making an allusion to that, but I was making allusion to the fact that the way things have been going so far this summer, the moderate risk of flash flooding would be over upstate New York and the state of Vermont.
Yes.
Vermont this summer has been like the proverbial meteorological piñata. And it seems like whenever there was a case for some flooding issues, that poor Vermont has been getting battered around. They really have been getting hit quite a bit. And so if there is that even a minuscule chance that we may up that to a moderate risk somewhere within that slight zone, that would probably encompass a good part of the Granite State. I don't know what it is, but this summer has not been the best of summers weather-wise for Vermont.
No, and as I recall, last summer much of New England was bone dry and in a drought. So this is nature's balancing act. Sometimes you're playing poker and you draw a pair of deuces, and sometimes you draw a pair of aces. And I guess this is the year that they draw the deuces rather than the aces. Yeah, this is definitely, just like in snowstorms where I often refer to the areas that get heavy snow and other areas don't. And it's, there's always jackpot zones that set up in a particular season, and those tend to play out more than once. They play out, several times or more. So I think the same applies to rain. Now, the rainfall forecast amounts for the northern mid-Atlantic all the way up into Maine are for at least an inch and a half. And all that red that you see in eastern Pennsylvania, northwest New Jersey, the Hudson Valley, western New England, westernmost New England, parts of northern Vermont, into New Hampshire and Maine, that red area, that's all 2.5 inches plus. Now, again, this is convective. This is a convective situation, and these are sort of the smoothed out rainfall amounts because you certainly can't go to every small town here on a map like this. But bear in mind that in a situation like this, these thunderstorms could easily, if they're sitting over one spot over a long period of time, could easily produce double what is being forecast. So, if you wind up hearing about a spot that gets half a foot of rain out of this, you shouldn't be shocked. And actually, the rain is substantial across the lower Ohio and Tennessee Valley into parts of the deep south. You're looking at many areas showing 2.5 to 3 inches or more of rain during the next 7 days. And here too, it's convective, which means that some of those areas could easily, so locally, could wind up seeing double the amounts that are indicated. Meanwhile, we'll go to the eastern satellite view, and yeah, it's not only, it looks like it's also smoke free. I mean, we've got nice sunshine up and down the eastern seaboard, and it's not often when you look at the satellite signatures here, you see the two. This is actually quite interesting for August, Joe. Look at how distinct these two systems are. The one I just circled that covers Indiana and Ohio, that's basically representing the energy that's associated with the warm front. And then take a look at those right behind it, how the rotation signature on the satellite is very well defined. So this is telling you that we've got this is a fairly strong system that is coming eastward.
It is, and as I've said over and over again this summer, unlike other summers, especially the summers that I could remember back in the 70s and 80s, where you look at the 500 millibar, the upper level winds, and there's hardly more than 2 or 3 or 4 height lines across the entire country, indicating little movement, stagnant air mass. And yet this particular summer, we have seen so many robust short waves dropping down out of Canada, which have really stirred the atmosphere up and have produced a lot of the dynamic weather that we've been hearing about on a nationwide basis. So this seemingly is not going to end, at least in the foreseeable future, as Joe just pointed out, and you can see it even on the satellite picture. You have what appears to be 3 different areas of activity, which will certainly, why don't we call them the meteorological swizzle sticks for the coming days ahead?
Pretty much. I'm just kind of outlining here again. Number 1, that's the oddest looking number 2 I've ever drawn. But the number 1 is the warm front, and represents the warm front approaching. Number 2 is the cold front. There's actually another short wave that's up in the Pacific Northwest, but it certainly shows how strong the Canadian flow, the Canadian influence has been. Not only from the standpoint of bringing all the smoke down when it did, but of course, all these weather systems that have been marching southeast and eastward, impacting the Northeast, the Mid-Atlantic, the Great Lakes, the Ohio Valley, and so on. So definitely impressive. And the radar at the moment, radars at the moment, quiet New England all the way down to Florida. But we do see some patchy showers in West Virginia. This is the patch that is approaching me. It seems like it's forever approaching me today. It's never getting here. I need some rain here, folks. This way I don't have to stand outside with the hose. But I do seem to have some heavy downpours and a thunderstorm right on my doorstep. Although I'm not hearing it pounding on my roof yet, so I'm hoping I get some rain out of this. And you see the signatures on the satellite loop, by the way. The arc of showers up in Michigan, back into the lower part of Lake Michigan, and then of course the patchy showers in West Virginia are tied to that. That's that first short wave, and then you see the twist here on the radar that sits Looks like the axis of that twist is right on the border of South Dakota, Nebraska, and Iowa. There's another tri-state area right there to mention. And anyway, that's our our system that's coming in for Monday. So I want to take a look at, I've got the overnight GFS. One of the things I've at least for this particular spring and summer is that the global models for some reason have done a lot better with these things than some of the short range models. So I'm just going to kind of stick to this. And I just want to point out what's going on in the upper atmosphere, because this is very important to what's going to happen tomorrow. So, here's your first short wave that represents the warm front. Here's the second one that's actually an upper low, which was the more impressive of the two short waves when we looked at the satellite view. And right now here in the east, they're really, we're kind of in a little bit of a ridge there, so there's not much going on. But watch what happens here as we go through tonight and tomorrow. That first short wave lifts the warm front up. Okay, you see the brown areas in eastern Pennsylvania that go up into New England, representing some stronger winds. I'm looking at the 700 millibar level, or roughly just under 10,000 feet. It's an area that I like to look at when it comes to trying to explain, try to see if we're going to get severe weather or not. So that jet represents that line of showers and storms that'll move through overnight into tomorrow morning. And then you'll notice that by tomorrow evening, as the second short wave comes around, it weakens a little bit tonight into tomorrow morning, and then re-strengthens during the day tomorrow. So suddenly you have another cutoff low that forms just east of Lake Huron, and all these brown spots that you see running down from northern New Jersey and southern New York southwestward into northern Georgia. Those are all jet streaks, and they would imply that these could be areas of strong wind shear, winds increasing with height, which would induce rotation, and you could wind up not only with severe weather that produces strong gusty winds of 50 knots or more, but you could also certainly have enough rotation that it could spin up a few tornadoes. I mean, this is a fairly dynamic setup for early August. So it's hard to ignore the possibility that there's going to be severe weather around tomorrow.
And somebody on the chat board, I'm sorry, I lost my track on the chat board, but somebody was asking about what's the situation in regard to the smoke. We actually will have a little smoke to deal with across the Northeast today, according to the forecast that I'm looking at. But that dissipates. Joe, it seems to, according to smoke forecast I've been looking at, it seems now that most of the Canadian wildfire smoke is concentrated more over the central and western United States. The smoke or the fires, the wildfires that were occurring over eastern Canada that were being vented directly down toward the northeastern U.S., New York area, they seem to have, I mean, they're still around, but they seem to have petered out considerably. So it would seem that when we get into that northwesterly flow of drier and less humid weather, that it's not anywhere near as bad as the situation was, let's say, even a month ago, where every time it turned to the north and west, we ended up getting smoky skies. So maybe at least in this part of the United States, our part of the country, yeah, there's still smoke. If you look up today in the sky, you'll see that it's not a deep blue, more like a steely blue, which indicates, the smoke of the higher altitudes, but it's not quite as bad as it was a month ago. And again, the main thrust of smoky weather seems to be concentrated mostly over the central and especially the western United States right now.
Sandy Blue Ocean Joe just hit Super Chat today. He says, I'm going to use this name on your chat. Oh, as opposed to an environmental coffee house. Gotcha. Sandy Blue Ocean. I love your show. I'm hooked since December. Great work. Thank you, Sandy. And if this winter is more active than last winter, which is pretty much a given since last winter was just a big duh, I think you're going to enjoy the show a lot during the winter months, because that's when Joe and I, that's where we revel in it.
We actually have several times during the winter season, we have contests as to which one of us can clear out the local food stores faster in advance of a major storm. So
Well, right. Even here in North Georgia, they do that. Okay, so here's our surface map from the GFS, and there's actually a closed surface low in northern Indiana that with that lead shortwave that opens up. So the second one becomes the more important system. So here's your warm front for tonight. So by this evening, there'll be showers and some thunderstorms over much of central Pennsylvania into northeastern Virginia. And this is going to be one of those instances where they actually hold together during the overnight. By 2 a.m., there's pockets of heavy rain being indicated on the GFS. Those yellow areas, I suspect, will probably be thunderstorms in northern New Jersey and northeastern Pennsylvania. Then they move it to across Long Island, New England, southern and central New England, and upstate New York. So this is your warm front for tomorrow morning. And as we said earlier, again, how far north does it get? And how much daytime heating is going to occur? If you're in western New England, southern New England, Long Island, New York City, the Hudson Valley, east of the Hudson, I think that's a critical question in terms of whether you get into severe weather or not. But by early afternoon, if you're west, this is where you start to get pockets of thunderstorms that start to develop early on, and then they really fire up afterwards. So you can see how the GFS it doesn't usually handle convective situations that well. But as I said, the global models this summer seem to be doing better. I mean, it really goes kind of hog wild with the radar. 8 o'clock tomorrow night, it's got some rather hefty thunderstorms that it shows. From southwestern New York through central and eastern Pennsylvania. There's a big cluster over northern New Jersey, New York City, and over western Long Island. And then also, I don't want to leave out the southern part of this, which is going to be down through West Virginia, North and South Carolina into Georgia. In fact, SPC on their discussion mentioned the possibility of an MCS in the southern on the southern tail of this weather system. So that could be for me here in northeast Georgia.
Yeah, and you don't see that too often that far south down in your area. I mean, usually you see these MCS. I'm an old timer. I still refer to them more often than not as MCC.
MCC, yes, which is a convective complex.
Yes.
And then they switched it to S, which is a mesoscale convective system. So yes. We pretty much know what we're going to deal with tomorrow. So, and again, this is going to impact, a large area of the East Coast. So we try to be very inclusive here. We try to talk about everybody. So we like to, we like to hear from folks from all over the U.S. And Canada and anywhere else. And occasionally we do. Anyway, this goes by. Maybe the storms weaken a little bit as they go eastward, but because you have this short wave involved, this is not just daytime stuff that develops. So this is a little more organized. This is much more organized. So some of those storms will probably hold together as they move east and offshore. And then on Tuesday, with the low still up east of Lake Ontario spinning around in the upper trough, there'll probably be some showers and thunderstorms scattered around in the afternoon and evening, particularly in New England and in upstate New York. The southern edge south of New York City, it probably doesn't look like much. And as we head into the middle part of next week, I think we probably get a bit of a humidity break again Wednesday into Thursday. Perhaps it's maybe as certainly I think it would be as much as what we've seen yesterday and today, maybe a little bit more. And then at the end of the week, we've got another weather system Thursday night and Friday with another approaching cold front. And there's still another one that might come along next weekend, but that's still far enough down the road that we can worry about that after we get this first one done.
And do you know, I mean, again, as I'll go back to what I mentioned at the onset of the show, or not really at the onset, but 5 or 10 minutes into the show. I mean, this is weird that here it is. We're reaching midsummer. This, in fact, I think either today or tomorrow officially is the point of the middle of the summer between the solstice and the autumnal equinox. And we're seeing just one after another of these systems coming out, a very progressive weather pattern, which, again, I could remember back in the 70s, they'd say, my God, when is the next cold front? We can't even see when the next cold front is coming to break this siege of heat and humidity.
Right.
We'd go 9-10 days of heat, hazy, hot. And this is totally, completely different. I mean, for all of what people have been saying about the extreme heat in the southwestern states, and we wish those people well in Tucson and Phoenix and Las Vegas and whatever. I mean, for all of that, this has been a weird summer for us here in the northeastern states. And again, I mentioned this about a week ago. New York City, Central Park, has not had a single heat wave. Now we've had a long siege. I mean, the whole month of July was one big sauna in terms of high dew points and high humidity, which made it most uncomfortable. But in terms of heat, in terms of extreme heat, stringing together a number of 90-plus degree days, we haven't done that. And that is in part due to the fact that we've had, again, all of these systems that have rapidly raced across the country. And as we just pointed out, at least two coming our way. Well, three. Either the warm front tomorrow, the cold front tomorrow night, another front coming in later on this week, maybe another yet next weekend. It's crazy.
It is. I've switched to the tropical Pacific satellite so we could look at two hurricanes. Hurricane Eugene, Joe, Eugene is south and west of the Baja Peninsula, and they're going to see some gusty winds in the southern portion of the Baja Peninsula of California as the storm is offshore. But I want to call your attention to a rather impressive system, and for a number of reasons, including the fact that the forecasters at the Hurricane Center have had a really tough time with this. They've been basically trying to weaken it and make it go away, and it's done exactly the opposite. This is Hurricane Dora that is marching across the Pacific. It's was a very small hurricane a day or two ago, but it not only has seemed to have expanded quite considerably. And by the way, I know you might look at this and says, well, that doesn't look very big. Remember, you're talking about a satellite loop here that goes from the west coast of Mexico and Hawaii. You can see where the Hawaiian Islands are, and actually extends to the satellite extends just about to the international date line. So this is a pretty big picture we're looking at. Dora, Joe, is an annular hurricane, which should not be confused with an annual hurricane. An annular hurricane is symmetrical, and they tend to be large. As I said, they're symmetrical. They usually don't have rain bands the way regular hurricanes do, which tend to be more asymmetrical. They also tend to behave in ways that defy forecast rules. You see them in situations where the environment is telling you that the storm should not be strengthening, that it should be weakening, and it doesn't do that. For some reason, it seems to be able to overcome negative factors in the atmosphere that would cause the storms to weaken, and they stay stronger for longer. And that's what Dora has done. It's almost a Category 5 hurricane. I think they're carrying 125 knots, which is just below Category 5. Very impressive. And here's a situation you don't see often either, because a lot of times when these storms that start in the eastern Pacific march across, they get close to Hawaii, but then they fall apart before they get here. Well, the forecast track of Dora is that it's going to pass as a major hurricane, Joe, almost over 400 miles, maybe close to 500 miles south of the Big Island. It's moving,
Right.
it's moving south of due west now, and I think the Hurricane Center's thrown in the towel because I've been looking at this since Friday, where they had this thing, as a hurricane weakening to a tropical storm. Then they sort of kept it as a hurricane. Now they got the M's in there. By the end of the forecast period, which is 2 a.m. this coming Friday, it will be a hurricane only about a couple of hundred miles east of the international date line. So we may actually have a situation here. And I think I recall a few years ago maybe it was a little more than a few years ago, where we had a couple of hurricanes, I think, that did that, where they crossed the international date line and went to the other side. This one looks like it has a fairly strong chance of doing the same thing. Not that there's anything magical about it, but you just don't see that very often.
Well, you said that the Hurricane Center in Miami is just ready to throw in the towel on trying to forecast the intensity. Now, I noticed that the latest position of this storm is 140.1 degrees west longitude. Now, anything that is anything west of 140, the Hurricane Center in Miami hands off to the Central Pacific Hurricane Center in Honolulu. And, they're 1/10 of a degree to the west of that 140 line. And I was half expecting to see Honolulu pick it up or take it from Miami this morning. They haven't, but certainly now in the coming hours, it's going to become Hawaii or Honolulu's responsibility to track this thing and to figure out where this thing is going and how strong it's going to be. And yeah, this doesn't happen very often, where a system goes all the way from near Mexico to south of Honolulu to south of Hawaii and actually crosses the date line and actually would get another name, right? Or does it get another name?
I think because then it goes to I think it goes to Japan with the typhoon or center, so they go get to maybe not. They changed the rules when it came to that a couple of years ago, so maybe it keeps the name, which I think just makes it easier. If you're following a storm and you're not a professional and you're following a storm that was named something and then it gets changed and you miss a news cycle, you're like, well, where did my storm go? It's just easier to keep the same name. Barry Goldberg, Joe, you're going to like this one. Barry Goldberg, who's a semi-regular here on the chat board, has hit Super Chat, for which we thank him very much. Thank you, Barry. And he says, and I quote, "You might want to use this money to bet against my Mets this afternoon." So he's a Met fan, Joe.
The Mets have not won a single game. My sister and I went last Sunday to see the Mets at Citi Field. It was a perfect day, blue skies, puffy fair weather clouds. Mets beat the Nationals 5-2. Everything was right with the world. Justin Verlander pitched for the Mets, won his 250th career game. Everything was like hunky-dory. And then all of a sudden, they traded Verlander. They traded a whole slew of top-notch players that they had to, get rid of like a lot of that contractual, money with it. And all of a sudden now, the Mets have now lost 5. They have not won since my sister and I saw them last Sunday. And so now they're going for their 6th consecutive loss against the Orioles this afternoon. And I watched part of that game last night, Joe. Especially I was watching Jeff McNeil, who was the batting champion last year in the National League for the New York Mets. And he looked so frustrated, PO'd. I mean, like, the Mets lost last night 10-3, and it seems like the whole team is just, or what's left of the team is just thrown the towel in. They're now 10 games under 500. They're going nowhere. And Barry, what else can I say? That's the way. Then the interesting thing is that up until a few days ago, they were still in the running for the wild card. They were like 3 or 4 games out for the wild card. But now they just said, the hell with it. And what are you going to do?
I know. By the way, Rich Rothmansky says last we'll talk about the storms crossing the international date line. He says that Hurricane Julia may have done it last year. So I'm going to go back and look. There was, I don't quite remember. Maybe it was. Maybe that was the last one that did it.
And the fact is that, storms that go from off of Mexico rarely, and I want to underscore that word, rarely ever make it, tropical cyclones ever make it all the way over to the Central Pacific. They usually fall apart or dissipate long before that. Calvin was the first one to do that this year. And now for a second time, it looks like, well, it doesn't look like, it will be Dora that will make it all the way to the Central Pacific. And Dora may, as you pointed out, Joe, may make it all the way to the date line. This has been a really weird, remember, an El Nino usually means that activity in the Atlantic is suppressed but enhanced in the Pacific. Well, we haven't really. We've actually have seen that right now. There's nothing in the Atlantic. There are no tropical cyclones that the Hurricane Center in Miami have indicated. No depressions, not even tropical waves in the Atlantic. Meantime, the Pacific, which started slow, is now
It's picked up at the end of this last week, with
really
Eugene and Dora. So,
yeah.
but even the Pacific has been fairly subdued going into the month of August. August is a big month for the Pacific. It's bigger than August is for the Atlantic. So they do get a lot of tropical cyclone development on the Pacific side during the month of August. So if the El Nino is there and slowly but surely starting to gain a foothold, then I would expect probably more tropical cyclones developing in the Pacific in the next 5 or 6 weeks. And we'll see what the Atlantic does. But as you and I wanted to bring this up. I don't know if you saw this, but back over the winter, we were sort of trying to speculate on the Tonga undersea volcano, the Tonga volcano that erupted and sent all that moisture ball up into the stratosphere. I did read a story that was uh, someone from NASA uh, laid out the probability that moisture ball going into the upper atmosphere has caused uh, uh, the additional water vapor in the stratosphere has made for warmer conditions across the globe. So normally, when we've had volcanic eruptions that spew ash up into the atmosphere, they tend to bring cooling because they cut off the amount of sunlight. Well, the water vapor going into the stratosphere has actually magnified the amount of sunlight and causing the heat in the lower atmosphere to remain more contained, and therefore it has caused global temperatures to do what they're doing this spring and summer so far. So I thought that was kind of an interesting read.
Well, remember that the Tonga volcano was not like your normal volcano in the sense that, here's this island or this area of land, and here's this gigantic, what looks like a mountain, and it just erupts and sends all of that ash and dust into the atmosphere, an aerosol cloud, which covers a good part of the northern or southern hemisphere. Tonga was an underwater volcano. The eruption came from down below the ocean surface and blew
it basically blew the ocean into the sky.
Exactly.
Yeah, which was unusual, but it did that.
And all of these stories about and what you just brought up was a very good point. All of these stories that we've seen in recent weeks regarding the extreme heat, not only in the southwestern United States, but I mean across the entire globe, and they're saying, "Well, it's global warming. It's global warming. It's going to get worse in the past." But if what you say is true about Tonga blowing a tremendous amount of water vapor into the stratosphere and encircling the globe, then that will likely subside in the next 2 or 3 years. So volcanic eruptions only last for just so long before everything dissipates. And whenever we have a regular like the Mount Pinatubo eruption in 1991, which really cooled the atmosphere across the globe for a few years after it erupted. And a lot of the scientists said, oh, well, the reason why it's cool is because of Mount Pinatubo. Eventually, that's going to go away. But they have not really tied or made a connection between the unseasonably warm or incredibly warm weather across the globe in regard to Tonga. And just arbitrarily saying it's global warming and this is the beginning of the end or whatever like that. So we'll see what happens. Maybe in the next 2 or 3 years, we'll see the global temperatures, the extreme global temperatures subside a little bit, and then maybe more scientists will make the connection between Tonga and what has been happening in terms of extreme heat globally.
Mark G hitting super chat today. Thank you, Mark. He says, "Looks like New York baseball fans need to think about next year." Happy Sunday Fun Day, Joe and everybody on the chat board. And that actually is I think a good way to end the show. Do you have Briller Jeopardy, by the way?
I don't think so.
Okay. Well, I was going to say, if you do, let's hold it till tomorrow because I'm burning a chicken in the oven right now, so I have to.
Heck, but I won't even check.
Right. I really have to get to that. So thanks everybody for joining us. This was a fun show today. We had a lot to talk about and got a lot of information out there. So I really, really extra enjoyed it on this Sunday morning. Thanks everybody for taking time out of your Sunday to join us here on the Joe and Joe Weather Show, which, as we know, is brought to you by Tempest by WeatherFlow. Get the revolutionary Tempest weather system. Join the fastest growing observing weather network on the planet. The link is pinned at the top of the chat board. It's also on the descriptor of this video. Use the coupon code Joe and Joe Weather Show on anything you purchase from Tempest by WeatherFlow, and you get
10% off.
Omni True Value Hardware at 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon, New York. Your go-to place to make sure that you've got everything you need, not only to make your home look great, make sure that you're prepared in case there's a tropical storm or hurricane. Don't you like my impressive how I took it down an octave there for emphasis? 631-756-1125 for the best prices in town, and the website is
OmniTrueValue.com, and we want to thank once again Frank Scalera, Leon Probitsky, Dave Carter, Sandy Blue Ocean, the new moniker for environmental, Barry Goldberg, and Mark G for hitting the tip jar today. Thank you very, very much for your contributions to the J&J Weather Show. By the way, how is JJ?
Oh, doing what he always does during the show. He's fast asleep on the floor right next to me. One quick thing, Joe. Quick answer. Okay. I saw somebody post this. I've never heard this before, but apparently tomorrow is the end of what they called solar summer, and that solar autumn starts the next day. And I
never heard of that.
Good. Okay. So that's basically it's made up BS. So they came up with the concept that from the 90 long days where of the longest amount of daylight. Okay. So by that concept, that goes from like May something to August 7th, whatever it is in May, to August 7th. Those are the 90 days where we have the most daylight. And then, solar fall starts. So that would say that solar winter starts sometime in October, or something.
Winter or February?
Whatever. Yeah, something like that. October or early November. You know what? I read that and I said, this is just made up BS expressing what's already obvious to everybody and has no meaning whatsoever.
August 1st is what is called a cross-quarter day. It is Lammas, or breadloaf day, especially in Europe, which purportedly marked the midpoint of summer for some. And it is within a few days. I think either yesterday or today is the actual midpoint between the summer solstice and the autumnal equinox. So we're halfway through summer. And right now, from here on end, you're really going to start noticing the shortening of the days. Up until now, the days have been getting shorter, but it's been very subtle. And a month ago, it's 4:30, I wake up and I look out the window and it's already getting light out. And I did that this morning at 4:30 and it was still dark. So the days are now going to be more rapidly shortening, and you're really going to begin to notice that the evenings are not as bright as they used to be. The mornings are not as light as they used to be. And it just means that we're on our way down slope.
Yes.
And soon we're going to be noticing it in the temperatures.
And we're not as young as we used to be, although we are still both as very much as handsome as we used to be. How's that? All right. Yes. Thanks again, folks. We'll see you tomorrow, 7:35 p.m. And we'll be in the throes of severe weather at that time. So mark it down. We'll be here. Bye-bye.
Bye.